Today, I'm going to show you how I made this no-weld infinity cube light pendant using inexpensive conduit with maker pipe connectors and hand-stitched leather accents. Let's get to it. An infinity cube uses two different length sections that when combined create this endless loop and creates this cube-type structure, hence the name infinity and cube. For this project, I needed 12 10.5-inch sections and 6 9-inch sections. The maker pipe connectors I'm using add 2 inches to the end of the pipe. Therefore, I'm going to need 12 8.5-inch and 6 7-inch pieces of conduit. I started by measuring out the pieces I needed, and then I cut them all to length. In the past, I've used this brass craft pipe cutter, which you simply wrap around the pipe, tighten it, turn it around the pipe a couple times, then tighten and repeat, and it leaves a nice clean cut. But since I have so many pieces to cut for this project, a hacksaw seemed quicker, and since I'll be plugging the ends with some end caps, the rougher cut isn't going to be an issue. Once all the pieces were cut, I simply slid a pipe into each end of the T-connector and tightened up the hardware. I made this quick diagram to show the correct placement and orientation of all the small and large sections, as well as the correct orientation of the T-connectors. Then I simply followed that piece by piece until the infinity cube was created. With the infinity cube assembled, I moved on to the hand-stitched leather accents. I started by measuring the two different lengths I would need, which ended up being 6 inches for the long sections and 4.5 for the short sections. Then I used some cardstock to measure the diameter of the pipe, and then I added 1/4 inch to that to account for the thickness of the leather. I ended up needing 3.25 inches. Next, I moved on to cutting all the pieces of leather I needed using my trusty rotary cutter. I ended up needing 22 pieces of leather in total, which includes some smaller pieces which you'll see later. Next, I used my wing divider to draw a stitch line down each side of the pieces of leather. Then I used a set of leather stitching chisels to punch the stitching holes. To ensure the spacing between each hole stays consistent as I work my way down the line, I always make sure to place the stitching chisel point furthest to the left in the last hole of the previous set of holes I punched. To attach the leather to the infinity cube, I used what's called a corset stitch to stitch the two sides of leather together. A corset stitch is achieved by threading 2 needles at opposite ends of the same thread, and then stitch the left needle over and across the seam and down into the next stitching hole, and then back up through the parallel hole on the opposite side. Then you do the opposite sequence with the right needle, pulling it tight as you go. Simple as that. Now if it's true snitches get stitches, you better watch what you say around this piece. All said and done, there's approximately 650 stitches on the piece. Now all this leather and stitching may seem excessive and unnecessary, but I really enjoy the look of stitched leather, and therefore I wanted to showcase it as part of the design of this piece. You could also use heat shrink wrap or paint to achieve a similar look if you wanted. To be able to hang this as a light pendant, I had to add a crossbar in the middle of the top section. This also meant cutting a few smaller pieces of leather to wrap the gap on either side of the crossbar T-connectors. The crossbar itself ended up measuring 6 inches. The center of the crossbar is not actually the center of the cube since the right side sticks out further, so make sure to measure from both sides of the cube to find the true center to ensure the pendant hangs right. I needed a way to run a power cord through the crossbar, so I drilled a hole in the crossbar for a hollow threaded rod to run through. I used a clamp to hold the conduit as I drilled, but apparently I didn't tighten it enough to avoid this oh crap moment. I wrapped the crossbar with leather too, but forgot about needing to keep a hole for the threaded rod. But with my trusty X-Acto knife, I was able to remedy the situation. As I mentioned earlier, to give the exposed ends of the conduit a more finished look, I added these end caps from MakerPipe that you simply push in the end. I have a bunch of different length threaded rods, so I mixed and matched until I found one that would position the light bulb exactly in the center of the cube. To actually hang the pendant, I needed some way to attach a cable to the crossbar, and this is what I came up with. A piece of leather with a hole in the center for the threaded rod, and then 2 holes at either end that meet at the top when wrapped around the crossbar. The hole at the top can then be connected to a wire or cable. I punched a few stitching holes at the top that I will use later to connect the 2 sides together. Next, I threaded the power cord down through the rod, hooked up the wiring to the socket, and then mounted the socket onto the threaded rod. To hold the 2 pieces of the hanging bracket together while I stitched them, I used some Weld adhesive. Then I used 2 needles to keep the stitching holes lined up while the adhesive dried, and then stitched the sides together using a saddle stitch. To hang the pendant, I picked up this cable and a few accessories to attach the cable to the leather mounting bracket. Now you can obviously use any light bulb you like, but I got these cool geometric shaped light bulbs from Nanoleaf a little while back, and I thought that their shape played well with the infinity cube angles. And with that, the infinity cube light pendant was done. If you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting that subscribe and bell button. I also post a lot of behind the scenes and smaller scale projects as Ethan Carter Designs on Instagram, and would love to have you follow me there as well. I've also queued up a couple more videos I know you'll enjoy right here. Thanks for watching.